Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for the latest episode of What We Do in the Shadows, The Casino. And I really enjoyed this one. They've been on a nice roll lately with this season, and I just love the execution and escalation that they're able to do with this show. It just freaking goes so well with this little thing that we're shown in the beginning, and then we're shown the importance of it, and then we gotta deal with the aftermath of that, while we also have our own characters having their own kind of like storylines going throughout. We've got like the main story of them going on a trip, and we've got kind of one mainly dealing with Laszlo and his friend, and then we've also got Nandor kind of like contemplating the nature of existence. So, we start off and we see that the vampires are going on a road trip. Now, they're talking about Sin City, and that makes you kind of think, oh, Las Vegas. But then, and they go into the tune instead of Las Vegas, it's Atlantic City, and it's like, okay, didn't think you were going there, but it makes sense since they're the Staten Island vampires, and it's like, okay, let's go. And this is, of course, wrapped up with this Shawnee dude, who was in the Brain Scramblies one that they kind of messed around with, but like Laszlo's good friends with the dude. And a big part of this is that they have to take their ancestral soil with them so that way they can get sleep and make sure that they've got powers. And it's kind of interesting. We see them doing their little bags and stuff like that. And they're all excited for the trip because they got to make these kind of preparations. And so we've got everything set up. We've got them with all their luggage and everything. And a really cool thing that I liked is that Laszlo's, of course, playing and mecking around with the piano, and then they do the intro theme that they've got, and seamlessly kind of go into that. And instead of seeing the normal kind of thing that would lead into What We Do in the Shadows, we see them riding the bus to Atlantic City as it's a party bus. It was just a really cool kind of change up, and I really like when they do those kind of things. Now, granted, it's got to be executed well, and this one definitely did it. So they pretty much get there. They're setting themselves up and everything. They're, of course, linking up with their party group and all that. We see them kind of set everything up, putting out their ancestral soil so that way they can get everything situated. Of course, Guillermo really still is not getting the respect he deserves, but we see them having this kind of dinner. The vampires kind of like mucking around and being like, yeah, we're eating this is good, kind of shit. And we see that it's mainly there as a vow renewal kind of thing for Shawnee and his wife. And of course, he needs his main man, Laszlo, there, as well as like all the rest of the kind of group there, getting some Ocean's 11 kind of things as he's dropping that. I'm like, I thought that if it wasn't handled like it was, it would be get kind of annoying. Funnily enough, he's like talking just like how nerdy he is into the Ocean's universe, and then it does become kind of important later on as the plot progresses. We do see that one of the group kind of like freaks out, and of course they order Guillermo around like he's still the familiar. Nandor, of course, then hits on Laszlo and Nadja for that, and they're like, listen, he's a bodyguard, let's try and like make him feel like part of the group. And I'm like, wow, that is a great thing for Nandor to do. It's a hard thing to kind of transition there, but it's really cool to see that kind of relationship kind of grow more with Nandor. Now, granted, of course, they have been vampire and familiar for years, but seeing Nandor also go to his group and be like, hey, he saved our lives, let's try and make him feel more part of the group. And then, of course, Guillermo comes back having then tried to get a mop and a broom for the mess that had happened, and then Nadja and Laszlo are trying to like strike up conversation with him, trying to see if he's got a girlfriend or a boyfriend or anything like that. And a real cool thing about Laszlo is he doesn't care who you're into. Guys with guys, girls with girls, guys with girls, all that kind of stuff. He's like, yeah, it's really kind of good, man. And it's kind of it's an interesting kind of outlook that he's got, even though he sometimes is an asshole towards people. Then they kind of almost get into a way that they're going to be getting deeper into Guillermo's kind of like family history and all that kind of stuff, because he said that it's usually more just private stuff and like, oh, come on and all that. And we had also seen that Colin Robinson was kind of more in the background. He was feeding because of all the kind of weird shit that was going on with the group dinner going on. But then we see that Shawnee comes up and says, hey, we got caught these chips, so let's go play shit and everything. It's like, all right. Well, we see that Nandor pretty much gets hooked onto this Big Bang Theory kind of thing. And he's going and going and going. It's like, yeah, all right, this is kind of cool. We see Colin Robinson doing kind of like some kind of card game. And just, he fucking tanks that damn table hard and is able to fucking like, people just fucking are done with it. They like pass out, they like go to sleep and shit. It's like, god damn, he knows what he's fucking doing. Well, the big kind of bit gets in that they're like doing all this and then they're gonna be getting ready to go to bed, and we see that the ancestral soil is gone, and this is setting up a lot of shit because Colin Robinson was supposed to watch the rooms, but he was watching his favorite casino program, which was pretty much just like the advert for the casino, like playing the games and shit like that. And they had sucked up the ancestral soil, all of them, and they're freaking out. Now, before we'd seen this a little bit, we'd also seen that like Nadja was part of the Rat Pack. This becomes important because this kind of factors into them needing help, and her going with the ladies and just watching them, and her like flashing them just full on crotch kind of thing, and like yeah, and going into the history about like ain't that a kick in the head was kind of funny and kind of cool to kind of see them kind of broken up and getting little bits of history for each of the kind of different characters. But they're freaking out because they won't be able to sleep, they won't have their powers and shit, and they'll be getting all kind of freaky. So they're like, we got to send Guillermo to get the ancestral soil. Now, at first, I thought they were just going to send him back to New York. And it's like, all right, fine. You can go back, you get the soil, we're good and everything. Laszlo goes to Shawnee and says, listen, I need your card, but I can't tell you what for. It's like, all right, cool, just pay me back as soon as possible. It's like, ah, shit. And we see that, like, he's kind of got the gambling kind of problem going on. Well, they get Guillermo plane tickets. And he's like, well, I've never been to Europe before. As we then see it in kind of found footage style, as Guillermo's pretty much recording himself. And this was kind of cool because normally sometimes if that's not, of course, executed properly, it gets just kind of janky and doesn't really fit within the flow of what's going on when we're doing kind of a mockumentary kind of style of what's going on. But this one worked very well because Guillermo's like, yeah, I'm on my plane. And he's like, yeah, I'm having a trip. So he gets, of course, to London. He's able to get it up. Has to go back. Then he goes to Greece. Gets that. And everything. Whew. Last one that got sketchy was, of course, he had to be near Iran for Nandor's kind of thing. It's like, all right, fine. He gets a little bit across the board. He's like, fine, go. And kind of like runs back. But it was kind of cool to see how he could have taken his time a little bit more if he wanted to, but he had a job to do, and he did it. Why is this important? Because after we see that they aren't able to have their sleep and whatnot, we see them at the vow renewal, and they are just acting kind of fucking crazy. They think that it's been like days and all that, and Andrew's like, Laszlo's wigging, and Nadja was like down on the floor, and they of course think that they're drunk, which actually really helps their case because they're exhibiting most of the kind of symptoms that you would attribute to drunkenness. And Colin's like, yeah, it's only been 14 hours, and all this shit's going nuts. We see that Nadja tries to go to the Rat Pack to get money, and of course they just feel bad for her, and they just give him like $300 because they need to pay back Shawnee, and because we find out he hasn't even paid for deck that he needs for his wife, the vow renewal, he's like lost all the money because he's bad at gambling. It's a bad thing, and they're trying to figure out what to do. While this is going on, Nandor and Colin Robinson have a kind of side thing as he really got into the whole Big Bang Theory thing and wanted to know what it was, and then he's explaining the whole thing about the Big Bang Theory as we see that Nandor thought that the Earth was held up on the back of elephants that ride on a great turtle, and he's believed this for 750 years. And then having his worldview kind of like blasted like that and thinking like, holy shit. And it's crazy because at first he's like, this is what I believed. And then Colin's getting into the kind of minutia, everything like that. So it's more kind of telling him the information, but also kind of like being able to feed off of him for the information as well. Colin. He's a multitasker on that kind of thing. But seeing Nandor try and come to grips with that, while also seeing him really get into the Big Bang Theory show, me like, oh, that's being such a Leonard. Because we'd seen their powers fluctuating because Laszlo tried to turn into a bat, but he just turned into a sparrow. And just seeing him being like, what's it all about? I mean, what does it mean to be a vampire? And what is all of existence? And even though it was kind of funny in the beginning, it's like, oh, okay, he doesn't have sleep, he's kind of groggy. We've all been in those kind of situations where you haven't really run on the amount of sleep that you really need, and you're not really feeling yourself. And then seeing him kind of deal with that kind of shit, it was really kind of interesting, and it really gives us some nice insight into his character as he's trying to figure out what it means to be in an existence like that. That's this expanded worldview of what's in space and how, like, the Big Bang happened. It's really kind of cool to see that kind of, like, this supernatural entity dealing with these different various scientific concepts. Well, Guillermo gets back and is able to pretty much, like, set him up. Of course, Nandor tried to tell him to, like, shake out the dirt. He's like, screw that, you guys need your sleep. So they kind of get refreshed, and they're like, alright, we need to pay back Shawnee. How are we going to do this? So Guillermo pretty much came up with a plan, and he then tries to relay the plan, but each of them are pretty much back in mostly their form, as Laszlo's kind of giving him some shit. But he's like, listen, we fucking know the plan. Just go over it again if you could, please. So then we see that they decided that there's going to be a big fight going on. So this is where it kind of turns into their own kind of Ocean's 11 kind of thing. They were both going to hypnotize the fighters and then set their kind of bet to whatever they were going to do to make sure that they won, and then of course use the winnings to pay back Shawnee. And this gets lined up because they are able to hypnotize both fighters, and of course, ain't that a kick in the head is going to be the trigger word. And it's really funny because we see it done Ocean style, and it's not really like overdone. You know those kind of homages that pretty much rip it straight for straight, and you just don't really get their own kind of take on it. That's not what they do here. They put their own kind of what we do on the Shadows take on this, because they're sitting down, they're watching the fight, they get into that round, Nadja does the whole line, and then one of the dudes fucking delivers an uppercut that knocks the dude's fucking head off, his opponent's head off, into the crowd, and the dude's dead. And Guillermo is fucking thunderstruck, like, sweet Jesus, we killed a man, what the fuck? And we then, everybody's freaking the fuck out, we go down back into the ring, and we see the dude's, like, in the corner, like, I fucking killed a man. It was just, I was not expecting the dude's head to come clean fucking off and sail into the crowd. I have to hand it to him. Their effects for what they do in this show are so good, because it was seamless. I'm like, holy shit, his head came off and it's in the crowd. And granted, it's fast, it's effective, and it doesn't look fake or cheap. It's like, sweet Jesus. So they still win, and Guillermo's like, shit. I mean, granted, he has helped with the vampires killing people. He has killed vampires and had to kill people, but it's like, if you didn't need to kill somebody, you gotta just, like, shit, man, like, you gotta work on that hypnosis shit, bro. So we see that Colin then of course has to get his meal in, as well as he's then counting out the winnings and pretty much sucking the person dry who's supposed to dole out the winnings. But they're like, hey Shawnee, here you go, paid it back, bro. And it's like, it's a really cool Laszlo thing. Like, most of the time, he's kind of an asshole. He'd run away from the group, try and hide himself to get out of a fucking pain someone previously, and now he's like, I kind of feel for this dude. I want to do something to make sure that he's paid back. And the group pay him back. Now, granted, it really doesn't help because he's like, yeah, I'm going to put this all on number 12 as the wife comes out, and then it's like, phew, and it's like, shit. So we then get towards the end, and we see that they write that they're happy that Guillermo is bodyguard, even though they had familiar and then scratched out. And Guillermo, even though it's kind of weird, he's still showing that they appreciate him, and he likes that, and we see his kind of happiness to that. It's it's really nice to kind of see that for him. And you do root for him and the other vampires, even though they do their own kind of assholish tendencies and get themselves into stupid fucking situations and screw themselves royally and then have to deal with the consequences. Like, the advisor was telling him before the trip, it's like, we're really backed up on, like, Vampiric Council shit, and you're taking a fucking trip? Like, what the fuck? So, we know that kind of shit's gonna probably hit the fan later on, so I am truly excited to see what that kind of stuff goes on. I really enjoyed this episode because it really just executed well on their jokes and really had a good flow for characters and storylines, because we had the main storyline, but then we had branches of like and kind of we had our A storyline dealing with everything going on in Atlantic City, which then got our B storyline of like, okay, we got the ancestral soil, we got to kind of deal with that, and that has the Shawnee kind of aspect, and then we have Nandor with his kind of C storyline dealing with cosmic existence. And none of them felt like they were actively fighting for time. They organically happened, and they didn't act as a detriment to any other storyline. They wove very well, which is a hard thing to do, and I give props to the writers and the directors and the actors. They know what to do, they execute well, and I just love this show. I can't wait to see what they do next. So those are my opinions on the episode. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.